All right, today we're going to be talking about what to do when you feel like you're too busy to write. As a person who is also struggling with this, I'm no longer a full-time college student, but I'm still going to college, and I do work technically part-time. Full-time as a librarian, but full-time as a librarian is 20 hours a week, unless you're a supervisor. So as a result of that, I work 20 hours a week. I have classes twice a week for an hour and a half. In general, I would say, and then on top of that, I actually have my freelance editing work, so it's even more than that. Long story short, I have a very busy life. I understand being busy, and especially as teenagers. For you guys in particular, you have school, you have work, you have chores, you have family emergencies that might pop up. You might have to take care of younger siblings. Even if you don't have younger siblings to take care of, you have homework, you have different things that you need to do in that day, you have different things that you might need to worry about. In general, there's lots of things that can prevent you from finishing your novel. But here are some different tactics for figuring out a writing schedule that works for you. These are all different things that I have tried and that other people have suggested to me and that other people have suggested in writing classes that I've been in. So hopefully one of these methods will appeal to you. That being said, I'm going to do a quick pause and say, hey, we have a writing contest this month. It is the February writing contest. Write about 2 people going on a date. It can be a romantic date, or it can be a goofy date. It can be a comedic date. It can be embarrassing. It can be funny. It can be an accident. They can be a vampire, I guess. You go nuts with it. As long as there are 2 people and a date is involved heavily in the plot, that is the concept. So go wild, go bonkers. It is for teens and adults, so any adults listening to the teen lessons, because I know some people do, know that's also an interest. It is due on February 29th at 8:45 p.m. because we close at 9, so I have to cut it off 15 minutes before we close. Unless you call me and say, like, hey, I'm on my way, then I might be okay with that, but you'd have to call the library and let me know. All right, back to the lesson. So the first one that I'm going to talk about is my personal preferred method. I call this, other people call it binge writing. I've noticed that pretty much everyone who binge writes, though, is neurodivergent of some flavor, whether it be ADHD, autism, anxiety, etc. In general, if your brain is not neurotypical, you probably write like this or would prefer to write like this. And that is whenever you have free time to write. Like you just are sitting there and you realize, I have an hour before I have to go to my next thing. Use it to binge write as much as you possibly can. Good to see you. Sorry. Now this method of writing may seem unconventional and you're like, well, don't people say write every day? Well, sure, if that works for you. That does not work for everyone. Hence why I'm suggesting the binge writing method. When you find these moments that you're like, hey, I have an hour and I have nothing to do, just pull out your computer or your notebook and just go. Just write until you have no more time or you don't have the energy to write anymore. Like, just keep going as much as you possibly can. I've actually found this works way better for me than if I try to write 100 words a day. And 100 words doesn't seem like a lot, but if I'm forcing myself to write every day, it actually gets really frustrating for me. But I've noticed that if I sit down and I have 3 hours and I just binge write 3,000 words, I get way more done than if I had tried to write 100 words every day that week. Then I just get burnt out and sad. Hence why, if you're neurodivergent, I would definitely give this a shot because it is very much neurodivergent friendly, the binge writing method. Most neurodivergent people cannot do the set aside time and then figure it out method. Speaking of which, that's the next one I'm going to talk about. Some people, typically more neurotypical people, but not everyone, some neurodivergent people can make this work. If you set aside time in your day, and I would say not even a lot of time in your day, I would say a minimum of 15 minutes. If you can do longer, great. But a minimum of 15 minutes in your day where you don't have anything going on. It can be while you're waiting for the bus. It can be while you're waiting for your teacher to show up. It can be during lunch. It can be just before you go to bed, as long as there's 15 minutes and it is just writing time. Then make sure every week during those 15 minutes you write. And again, I say 15 minimum. Obviously, if it's more, great. And this is when you would set a timer or a word limit and do what's called a writing sprint. So with set aside time, the writing sprint method works the best because of the fact that it forces you to write as fast as possible. Generally, I would say setting a timer is better for the sprint method, but some people find the word limit method works better because of the fact that then they're not as stressed about it, but at the same time they know that they only have X amount of time to write that much because they have set aside 15 minutes and they now have 2,000 word limit. Go. I wouldn't recommend 2,000 words in 15 minutes, please don't. But that being said, it was a random number that came out of my mouth. Yeah, I would say set a timer or / word limit, and then when you're done with that, put it away. Otherwise, you are going to burn yourself out. The only reason the binge writing method works is because I would say only do it once to twice a week. 3 times if you really can handle it, but be careful of burnout. With the set aside time method, I would definitely say, like I said, make sure you set a timer or a limit, because otherwise you're gonna get real heckin' tired, and the next day when your set aside time comes around, you're gonna go, what if I didn't? What if I just don't today? What if I instead go get ice cream and ignore that this is the thing? And you don't want to get yourself burnt out, especially if you're ADHD like me, or if you suspect that you are. Burnout is very real, and with ADHD we tend to push ourselves to the absolute limit because we expect to be hyper-focusing all the time, and then when we lose hyper-focus, we're then really hard on ourselves and like, oh, we didn't write 2,000 words today, that sucks, I'm not good enough. And it's like, that's not true. You just are burnt out and you need a break. So make sure to plan for breaks. Plan for only a little bit of time. I just felt like I should mention that because I feel like we have a high amount of people that are ADHD in here, and that have subscribed to the email. Alright, the next method that I'm going to talk about is the night owl method. Now, obviously this seems obvious, but it's important to figure out what time you work best. If you work best in the afternoon, work in the afternoon. If you work best in the morning, do it in the morning. If you work best at night, that's okay. I know that all the morning people are like, guess what, you have to wake up at 7 a.m., so you shouldn't stay up late writing. And it's like, well, sorry, but I work best then, so it's like, and that's okay. I'm personally a night owl person, so yeah, I get frustrated when the early bird people are like, why don't you just go to bed? And I'm like, because I get more done at night. You fools. But hey, for all you early bird people, good for you. Like, man, that is nice. You're blessed. Blessed with the gods of early morningness. But anyway, so if you work best at night, I would say make sure to set a timer, because we do live in an early bird world. So if you're not an early bird, you're a night owl, set a timer so that way you don't get lost in it and end up staying up till 4 a.m. and you have to get up at 7. Not a great idea. Happens. We have all done it if you're a night owl, but don't plan for that. Generally, I would say if you're a night owl, do like an hour before you go to bed, start your writing, or even 15 minutes before you go to bed. Like I said, you choose, but ultimately, if you work best at night, just make sure you set a timer so you can get to bed at a reasonable hour and not stay up too late to the point where you can't function. Next, I'm going to say early bird method. Now, again, if you are one of the lucky few who has been blessed to be an early bird and to function in the morning, by all means, wake up early and get your best writing done, even if it's just 5 to 15 minutes. I know that there are some stay-at-home moms that are also writers that this works best for them, where like they go drop off their kids at school and then immediately afterwards spend an hour and write. And that just works for them. And, that's fantastic. What works for them is great. It's glad that they can figure that out, And same thing with night owls. Sometimes I've heard that the night owl stay-at-home moms in particular will do this where it's like after their kids are in bed, they'll write for an hour. That works too. And then for high school and college students, after your homework is done, write for an hour. Or if you want to set a timer, 15 minutes before you do your homework. You do 15 minutes, or you can do it as a reward. If you see writing as a reward, you could definitely be like, I finished this math assignment, now 15 minutes of writing, and then I'll do my science assignment, and then 15 more minutes of writing. Because then it also helps break up your studying, so you're not just burning yourself out again. Yay, avoiding burnout. Because that's the hardest part with being too busy to write, is finding time can sometimes cause burnout if you're not careful. So if I'm mentioning it a lot, it's because I don't want you guys to burn out and be sad. Because I've had way too many people who have done that, and I'm like, please don't burn yourself out. It's not good. It's not going to help your writing. It's just going to make you sad and not function. All right. The next thing that I'm going to talk about is the anti-perfectionism method. There are so many different methods to avoid being perfectionistic. If you struggle with perfectionism and are like, that sentence isn't good enough, delete. That sentence isn't good enough, delete. You've written like 10,000 words, but you've also deleted 5,000, then you probably are a perfectionist. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's a quality that can work. But the problem is it does tend to impede your ability to finish a book. So I've run into a lot of perfectionists that I've worked with as an editor, as well as several of my friends are very perfectionistic. And so I get it. It's hard. It's rough. The only reason I think I'm not a perfectionist is because I grew up in a family with perfectionists, and so I was just like, I have to be the anti or I won't survive. So it's kind of funny. But that being said, my personal anti-perfectionism method, because I do have a tiny streak of it in me, even if it's not 100% there, is pen and paper. And the reason why is because you have to then scribble it out. And who wants to scribble it out? It looks gross. And so as a result, don't get the erasable pens. That's cheating. Get the regular pen with no eraser and just go at it. Especially because then if you write a bad sentence, you can always underline it, but then leave it. Keep going. The only problem with this is you do run into the fact that you have to type it up later, but then the beauty of that is then you're finished. So then when you're typing it up, you can be a perfectionist when you're typing it up later. But you get the book done first, or a short story. The other thing I would say is refuse to delete anything you type. And when I say refuse, like come up with some way of either rewarding yourself or punishing yourself for when you delete things or don't delete things. So if you don't delete anything in 15 minutes, then you can have a treat. Or something like that. That way your brain is trying to rewire itself for, oh, I don't want to delete this because I want that candy bar, or fill in the blank. Or you can do the, obviously I wouldn't encourage this, but you can also do the punishment method where every time you delete something, you're like, oh, I'll take one of the M&Ms out of the bag so I get less M&Ms at the end of this writing session, or something like that. I don't know. You figure out what works for you, but these are all different methods that I've heard can work for avoiding anti-perfectionism. The other thing that can help you avoid anti-perfectionism, to avoid perfectionism and be an anti-perfectionist, is to find someone to be your beta reader / editor. And when I say beta reader, I don't mean, oh my gosh, you're amazing. I mean, be willing to tell you the hard things. And the reason why this works is because then you don't have to do it yourself. And so I've noticed a lot of my perfectionistic friends will send me stuff because they know I'm an editor and they know I'm not going to be easy on them just because they're my friend. I'm actually going to be probably just as hard, if not a little harder on them than I would my typical clients, because of the fact that I know they know this stuff and I know that they have this down. Like, I'll always be nice, obviously. I'm not one of those mean editors that's like, do better. I'm not Gordon Ramsay, but for writing. No, I'm always like, hey, this is great, but here's what you gotta fix. And the reason that works for them is because then they don't have to worry about being a perfectionist, because I'm being their perfectionist. So then they can just write and they're like, Cheyenne, I'll be a perfectionist about it later if it sounds crappy. And so in some ways, finding someone like that can work. If you want me to be that person for you, I can. Just know that I'm slow. because I always put my professional clients first, and I will only do novels if it's for teens. I've decided I can't do novel work anymore for free for the Adult Writers Club. I'm only saying this because it's on the recording and I know some people watch it. I can do short stories of 50 pages or less for the adults. And then for teens, I'll still do novels, but that's mainly because of the fact that you guys do it slow enough that I can keep pace with you and feel like I can not be overloaded and overwhelmed. But I've just realized recently, I'm like, I have enough professional editing clients that need to come first that I can't afford to do novels for the adults. So I'm strictly doing that for teens. But as I said, short stories of 50 pages or less, I'm still happy to do for the adults. Anyway, side tangent aside, I'm more than happy to be that person for you guys. I'm more than happy to help you guys. I'm more than happy to coach you guys through struggles and things you're worried about. Yeah, know that I am here for you and I care. All right. Next writing method that I've never tried this one, but I've heard some people say it works, is the mood writing method. And I always thought that this was like, no way that works, but I've actually run into several traditional published authors that this works for them. I don't know how, but it does. I ran into one recently where she was like, yeah, I can't write unless I'm in the mood to write, and yes, a deadline helps, but ultimately if I'm not in the mood, I just can't. And so there's a lot of times where anytime she wakes up in the mood to write, she'll write. Doesn't matter what she has to do that day, she'll cancel all her plans just to get the writing done. And I think that's why it works. It's because she's a traditionally published author, she can afford to just cancel all of her plans and be like, I gotta write today because I'm in the mood. But that doesn't work for everyone. But if that works for you, you absolutely can do that. And just be like, you know what? Writing, I'm prioritizing it, and so all plans are canceled if I'm in the mood to write. If I'm not in the mood, great, we'll do the thing. And that can actually work, like I said, it can work really well. You just got to keep in mind, if you are traditionally publishing, you are under contract to finish by a certain time. So you will indeed have to cancel plans in order to write when you're in the mood. But that can work, for sure. And sometimes people find that they do their writing better if they do it that way. So if that's something that interests you, by all means, consider it. And I know you can't really afford to do this as high school kids and middle school kids because, you have school. You can't just be like, Mom, I'm not going to school today. I'm in the mood to write. I get that. But at the same time, you can still write between classes. You can still write during lunch. You can fit it in if you're a mood writer. It's just going to be harder if you're a mood writer at this age. And I'm sorry about that. It's rough for mood writers. But hey, if it works for you, it works for you. All right. This is something that I would recommend, but is also a good writing method, and that is the journaling method. Sorry, trying to make sure I don't pass out because I tend to lock my knees. All right, the journaling method is where you ultimately write your own journal, but it helps fuel you to write. Like you say, hey, here's all the writing ideas I had today, when I had them, here's my experiences talking about them with other people, or even if it wasn't about writing today and you're just like, today sucked for these reasons. Like, you can do that too, because it's still practicing writing and getting you going. And then sometimes if you put a cap on it and you're like, I'm just going to write a 200-word journal. By the time you're done with that 200-word journal, you're like, all right, I'm ready to go now. I'm ready to write. And it also helps give you practice about writing the important stuff. Now, the reason I say this is because I've run into this frequently, but that's okay. It's a normal problem with writers. So if you're like, oh, I do this, don't think, oh, I'm a terrible writer. Think, oh, I'm a normal. This is normal. But it is something to definitely look at. With a journal, it really will help you analyze writing what's most important. Because some people get bogged down in the details. They're like, I saw a pretty tree today. Oh yeah, and I almost got attacked by a bear. But this tree was so pretty. It's like, why are we focusing on the tree? You got attacked by a bear. And sometimes that happens in fiction writing too, where the person's like, main character almost got attacked by a bear. But we're going to have this really in-depth conversation about these two girls in a tent talking about boys. And it's like, this is not important. What's important is the bear. And so journaling can help you do that, because then you really have to take your whole day and say, what is most important about this day? Out of all the events that happened, so much happened today, what is the most important events that happened today? Bullet pointed list, what happened? And even, you don't have to do a bullet pointed list, but I'm saying, like, if you wanted to, you really could just do a bullet pointed list of these are the most important things out of the day. You might have other things that you'd like to talk about, like, hey, I had a conversation with my best friend about how she's, doing really great. You might want to talk about that, but is that the most important, interesting thing that happened that day? This will really help you with your fiction writing to analyze the same thing in scenes. What is the most important thing in this scene and that is most plot relevant, and what is not? That is also going to tell you where you need to tell and show. Now, I know this sounds insane because I say show, don't tell. And yes, that is the general rule. Always show, never tell. But there's a tiny, tiny little asterisk on it, like you see in contracts where it's like, by the way, I'm stealing your soul, in the little asterisk mark. And it can be concerning for sure. But the asterisk mark with show, don't tell is show always, don't tell, unless. The little asterisk is unless it is important to the character's life, but not important to the plot. Come on. And the reason why is because sometimes there are things you need to tell the reader, right? You're like, today it's really important that you know that he asked out so-and-so, because that's important to the subplot. But is it important to the main plot? No. For example, a great example of this would be in Harry Potter when Ron comes in and is freaking out because he just screamed at Fleur Delacour trying to ask her out. And everyone's like, dude, you're freaking out. She could have had Harry Potter be there and watch this scene. But that wasn't the important bit in the scene, right? And so as a result, instead she just had this reaction because it was an important part of his character arc, but it was not important to the plot. So she told us what happened instead of showing us what happened. That is the only time when telling is acceptable. Unless you're doing tactful telling, in which case that is a whole other ballgame. Again, don't try to do tactful telling until you've tried to do showing first. Because tactful telling is a blend of showing and telling. So if you don't know how to show, you can't figure out how to tactful tell. So figure out showing first, and then master tactful telling. Take one step at a time. All right, the last thing that I'm going to suggest as far as figuring out what works best with you and your writing schedule is to find out what motivates you to write. What makes it so you wake up in the morning and go, hey, I want to write something. I want to do something. I want to make this chapter super awesome and write about this fight scene. Is it because the scene's awesome? Is it because the book's awesome? Is it because you're feeling bored today? Is it, like, what is it? Figure out that thing that makes you want to write and see if you can't somehow artificially induce it. Which sounds cliche and weird, but it's true. You can artificially induce a writing mood. For example, I know some people are like, hey, if I get really, really relaxed, I want to write more. And so they'll create a very relaxing mood, they'll brew a cup of tea, they'll light a scented candle, and they'll be like, hey, I'm very relaxed, so now I want to write. And then there are other people who are like, I need a mood playlist. The mood playlist? Yeah, got some mood playlist writers in here. Yeah, that's also a great method, then to create a playlist, and then that way whenever the playlist is on, you are writing. Period. Then you have that association, so that way you just turn it on and you're like, writing time. And that works for some people. It works. So you got to find out what makes you want to write, and then see if you can't figure that out. Figure out how to make that artificially done. As I said, if you're a mood writer and it's just about how you woke up on the wrong side of the bed this morning or whatever, that's going to be harder, obviously. But even with mood writers, I find there's generally something.
So you get on the right side.
So you have to. You know, I don't know. You really can. Or you can do it if you're siblings and just be like, hey, if it helps you to write better, I'll just, you know, you out of your bed in the morning. But anyway, I don't know. But whatever works best for you, see if you can figure it out, you know, and really just take a minute and see if you can't think about it today and be like, hey, what helps me to write? And then how can I then access those things to help me write better, to help me do this better? Because of the fact that writing is important. And if writing is important to you, I will say, some people do this as a hobby, you know, some people it's not their ultimate goal. But if it is your goal to become a writer as a profession or even as a part-time thing, just a side gig, it's important that you dedicate the time to it. And it's important that you figure out how to dedicate the time to it. And it's important that you make it a part of your life and your daily routine. Or even not your daily routine. As I mentioned for the ADHD people, I am one of those people. I wrote 3,000 words last Saturday and haven't written a word since. So like,
I have to go like a week without writing like a single word, and then on like a random Saturday,
you just
like
binge. Yes,
pages.
Exactly. And so yeah, that's me. I binge write heavy, hardcore. I can go a week without writing, and then all of a sudden one day I'm like, and then there's all these words. Yeah, just spewing words. Yeah, so it's like it just happens. So like, when it comes to binge writing, that is perfectly acceptable and perfectly a method. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Like, yes, will it be harder for you? Absolutely, but it's just as hard for the mood writer. And yeah, writing's hard, okay? No one said this was easy, and if they did, I have concerns. They've either never tried writing or they're not doing it right, because it's hard. It doesn't matter if you love writing, it will still be hard to fit in the time, to make the time, to do it. And you do it because you love it, but you also do it because it's part of you.
Yeah.
Generally, I would say. Especially if you're not doing it as a hobby. It's part of you. It's a part of who you are. It's a part of what makes you tick. It's kind of like a scientist who loves chemistry. It's part of them. It's part of what they love. Yeah. You know? And so, same thing with writers. Just because you're a writer, I know a lot of people struggle with this. People say like, oh, you're getting an English degree, what are you going to do with that? You know, the whole Studio C skit, if you've seen it, you know, that thing, the stereotypical stereotype, it's rough, but don't let anyone tell you it's an illegitimate career.
Yeah.
Don't let anyone tell you.
Screw other people's opinions. You're
Yes.
the only one that matters.
Do what you want, because it matters. And on top of that, like, what if Brandon Sanderson had let, you know, someone tell him, you know, that writing thing, I don't think it's going to work out, buddy. Like, what if he'd let someone do that to him? Can you even imagine?
So sad.
It'd be so sad.
You would have so many good books.
Exactly. There's so many good things, and for him and for others that have come out of that. And he's run, you know, charity events and all sorts of things. There's this ripple effect that people never would have even seen, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah,
most
like you said,
became writers because they wanted to be like Brandon Sanderson.
There you go. See, you
like,
can't.
I want to have that kind of swag. I am now a writer, you guys.
You gotta let yourself, and you gotta also accept when you're a writer when you're small time too. That much I will say, because I will say, yes, we all want to be Brandon Sanderson, but you're still a writer even if you only sell 5 books. You still wrote a book and published
it. You don't sell any books. You're a writer.
Exactly. You still wrote a book and published it.
Yeah.
Period.
None of my stories have seen the light of day, but it's true.
You're still a writer. You're still an author. You are still an author, irregardless of how much you have or haven't published. I think the problem is people assume you're only an author if you're Jennifer A. Nielsen or J.K. Rowling or Brandon Sanderson or Rick Riordan. And it's like, no. Just because you're not in the top 5 most popular writers of the day, although J.K. Rowling's getting some heat because political stuff, but just because you're not in the top bestsellers list doesn't mean you're not an author. You're still an author. Even if you're writing fan fiction about Harry Potter on the internet, you're still an author. You still authored something. It may not be mostly originally your work, but you still authored something. And you need to realize you're an author and that it's okay to not have published something. It's okay to have published and not sold a lot. It's okay to struggle with your writing method. It's okay to not write the same way everyone else does. I think it's really hard, especially once you get on Instagram. I hope you guys haven't experienced this yet, but if you have, I feel like I need to mention this. There's so many people on Instagram who glamorize the writing life, but specifically the neurotypical writing life, where they can write every day and they can afford to write 15 to 20 minutes a day, and they're just like, I'm going to do my writing sprint every day today. And I'm like, some of us, that would burn us the heck out and we'd be crying in a corner. Like, some people, that just doesn't work for us, and that is okay. That is okay. Don't look at others and go like, oh my gosh, they wrote 20,000 words in a week, I'm terrible. No, you're still an author, you're still a writer. It doesn't matter how many words you put on the page, it matters that you wrote something. Yeah. You could have written one really dope line of dialogue and you're still up there. Yeah. You know, I've had some moments where I've worked with people and they're like, you know, I'm really struggling, feeling like maybe this isn't good enough, and I'm like, this line makes this whole scene worth it. Like, it's not about the fact that you struggle, it's about the fact that you're continuing in spite of the struggle. Anyway, long side tangent, but I understand that people generally who feel too busy to write can compare themselves really heavily to other people who aren't too busy to write, or have more time in the day,
or don't have a life other than writing.
Yeah, or don't have a life other than writing, or other things like that, and that's okay. Like, don't compare yourself to other people who write more than you. It doesn't matter if you write more or less. It just matters that you wrote. It just matters that you care about your writing. All right. Do you guys have any questions? Because I finished everything that I have, and that was only a half an hour. So, any questions about writing in general? You don't have to talk about writing methods or being too busy to write or things like that. We can talk about any writing questions you'd like, so long as it's not about a character named Bob. Anyway, I don't know why, for some reason I felt the need to say that.
No, Bob. 10 rules have been published.
I know there's for a fact one. There's at least one. There's probably way more than that.
The dude wrote
but
a story for his friend who was injured or something, right?
Yeah.
Is that the right story?
Funnily enough, I actually haven't run into that one. So I know there's more than that. I ran into one recently where she is the youngest junior fiction author because she's 10 in the UK.
Dang.
So because she's 10, and no one in the UK who's 10 has published until now, but they did.
Yeah, awesome.
But anyway, so 10-year-olds absolutely can get published. Is it hard?
Oh,
100%. Yeah, without a doubt, it is hard, but it is not impossible. By no stretch of the imagination, it is impossible. Heck, we have a girl here in Utah who actually got published at 11, so not 10, but 11. And she published a junior fiction series. It was on the shorter side, more like Magic Tree House length, but she published the series, 5 books worth. They're actually out of her library. They're downstairs. Dang. It's called the series of Benotropia or something like that. But yeah, and so it was great. And it was funny because I actually wasn't there because I got signed copies, but it was because my dad went to go to the store and she was at a store that he was at, so he bought them for me. So I never got to meet her, but it was funny nonetheless, because we were the same age at the time. It was kind of funky. But yeah, long story short, 10-year-olds can absolutely get published. Don't assume that age is a factor. Will it be hard? 100%. Will you need your parents' support? Also 100%. Will you also probably need an editor to help you out, whether or not it's your parents or someone else? Also, yes, but that is only because of the fact that because you are 10, or fill in the blank age that is younger than adult, but 10 in particular because that was the question you asked, because you are younger, you will be under higher scrutiny, period. Mm-hmm. There is ageism in this market. They assume that because you're an adult you know how to write better, which is not true. Absolutely not true. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that the stereotype isn't there. The stereotype is still there. It is still a fact, which is part of the reason why you need either a really hardcore beta reader or an editor, or someone who's willing to seriously help you, because you will be under seriously high scrutiny, and you will need your parents' help too, because if you do get a book signed because you're not an adult yet, the payment technically goes through your parents. So your parents, they pay your parents and then your parents pay you. kind of a thing,
Okay.
because you're underage. And so as a result of that, it is tricky. You need parental support, and you need someone who's willing to look over your stuff and be really like constructively criticism on it.
It's also hard.
That doesn't make it impossible.
Because like you don't have as much experience.
Yes.
Because I started writing in like 4th or 5th grade.
Yeah.
And you also like you've never been to a creative writing class.
Yeah.
After you're 10.
Yeah.
And so.
Exactly, because they don't offer creative writing classes when you're 10.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
go to a writing club.
Yeah, you're ahead of most people. Yeah, you definitely have an advantage.
My classmates are still using telling.
It's true.
It's so bad.
It's true. It's funny.
My classmates wrote 5 pages of literal just telling.
And you're sitting here like, haha, I know these stuff.
Yeah,
Woo,
I'm
I learned.
like, dude, I'm in a class with a bunch of 7th graders.
And they sometimes
And
still
there's
use
like,
telling.
There's
Yep.
like me
Yep.
and 2 other people that like consistently show. The rest are just flat telling.
Flat telling. And that's
so bad. Yeah.
because it's hard.
I'm
It's hard to
not-
find those
I'm just like,
resources.
imagine.
It's hard to find those resources though. Honestly, I with those types of people, I'm like, it's not that their writing is bad, it's that they don't know how to write well. You know, it's they haven't been experienced to these things.
Yeah.
I know that they're pretty much every single one of you when you walked in here was telling.
Oh, without doubt, yeah.
Like, yeah, so like you guys just weren't exposed to it. So it's not necessarily that you are a bad writer, it's that you don't know better yet. And so I would say 100% it's important to also gain that experience. It's actually funny because it's important to gain your experience on your own. I am so glad you guys are here in Writers Club. I'm going to tell you a funny story that I probably shouldn't tell, but I'm going to anyway. I am in a college creative writing class currently, and this is like the last one before we graduate, right? And they're all great writers. They've learned most of the basic principles like show, don't tell, etc. You know, those kinds of things. And they've learned all those basic principles. We're all at least on the same level that way. But I listen consistently to writing podcasts and to books, and I'm currently reading a book about writing by Ray Bradbury. And I'm currently, I always focused on my writing. I always went to writing conferences. I always went to writing clubs. Exactly.
2 weeks.
So excited. Anyway, you can see me at my editing table. I will have a table on Friday and Saturday, so you will see me. I will be in the fancy hall.
Yeah.
But yeah, so but yeah. Long story short, I go to writing conferences. I go to this. I do that. I tried really hard to do things like writing clubs and things like that, but not everyone does. I actually had several authors visiting our classroom because we've been lucky enough to have some authors visit, and people are asking questions that I already know the answers to. Because of the fact that I have done the work. I've done podcasts. I've done Writers Club. I've been to conferences. Heck, we had Jennifer Jenkins show up. If you've been to TABC, you know her. And literally everyone was like, who the heck is this lady? And I'm like, Jennifer! Like in the corner. I was like, I went to TABC, so I have a question about that. And she was, oh my gosh! It was great. But anyway, I could tell everyone in the room was looking at me like, oh. Because you gotta be willing to reach out, be willing to find resources. You can't just wait for the school to do it for you. You can just as easily self-educate. Some of the best writers I've ever run into are self-educated. They don't have a creative writing degree, but they write just as well as those who do because they went and found the resources themselves. So I would say yes.
That's so cool.
10-year-olds can be published. You can be published at any age. Just know that if you're under 18, you will have higher scrutiny.
A 3-year-old publishes like
You could publish probably. I bet a 3-year-old could publish one of those like I See a Dog books, one of those phonics books. Now they could do that. I bet your 3-year-old could get really creative. I see a blue polka dotted monster. It's like whoa. Anyway, yeah, you totally could. I would say as long as you are capable of putting words on the page or having someone transcribe them for you, yeah, you can do that. For sure. Yeah, any other questions about writing, publication, etc.? Anyone excited for L2E? We already said that, but yay! So excited.
I'm so freaking hyped. I'm bringing a friend, and we're going to have like
Nice.
matching outfits for most of the days.
Nice.
And I made like a mist cloak
Very
for
nice.
L2E. I'm so hyped.
I'm
Very
gonna
dope.
convince my teacher to come.
Dude, no way!
Do
That
it.
would be so cool.
That would be
so
awesome.
cool. Even though you would hate you're a teacher.
No, she's not bad anymore. She stopped being sexist.
All right then. But yeah, that being said, I think it's really important to go to conferences and things like that. And I know a lot of people are saying,
And
"Hey,
they're so much fun.
they are so much fun, and you learn so much, and you have gained so many resources, and you're gonna meet so many cool people."
Dude, class on Friday.
Yeah,
I'm so excited.
it's awesome. It's great. But yeah, so that being said, long story short, I would say with writing conferences.
If you want it, go get it.
Exactly. If you want to go get it, don't wait for creative writing classes. Don't wait for your professor to tell you how to do it. Don't wait for people to tell you you are ready to be published. Just go for it.
Yeah.
Like,
if you're ready to be published, you'll know.
Exactly. Go for it. And just give it a shot. I mean, heck, the first time I got published, it was the first Teen Author Bootcamp anthology that they did. And they were like, hey, we're doing an anthology. And I was like, why the heck not? I literally didn't think I would get published. I just thought, why not?
Yeah.
Why not give it a shot?
Why not?
And sure enough, it worked. So like, I mean, that doesn't mean it'll always work. I also got rejected from 2 of those anthologies, but hey, that's part of the writer's life.
Yeah, I had an author come to my
Yeah.
school a couple of days ago.
Yeah.
And he had a teacher that was kind of teaching him creative writing in secret.
Yeah.
And he's like, hey, to pass this class, you either need to get published or give me 5 rejection letters.
Ooh. Yeah, see, and that's
Yeah.
easy to do. Let me tell you right now.
Yeah.
Man, those editors and agents are tough people. So it's one of my favorite things, actually. People are starting to desensitize like stigma now around rejections on Instagram, and I really appreciate that about it.
Mm-hmm.
Because previously it was always like, I got published, and they didn't talk about, the 5,000 rejection letters they received. But now we have a ton of people who are like posting and being like, day 5 of receiving rejection letters.
Like, hello, I got rejected.
Yeah. Just honestly celebrate because you still tried.
Yeah.
And that's
You
what
tried, you
matters.
went for it, and now just like do it again.
Just keep trying. Just keep going for it.
Just keep pushing through.
Yeah, because eventually you're gonna find that, and especially because sometimes it's not even you. For example, once when I was part of Monster Ivy, that was fun. With Monster Ivy, they only really published dark fantasy. And they had published a novel that had dark fantasy hints, but it was more realism than fantasy. Like, it was like Scooby-Doo-esque in the regard that like turned out to be a guy in a mask. It wasn't actually fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
And so as a result, it was like this close to us saying yes, but we were also like, it's realism technically, it's not fantasy. And so we had to say no.
Yeah.
But it wasn't because it was a bad book, it was just a bad fit. For the company, it didn't fit. Because unfortunately, companies do market to a certain audience and genre generally. So if you're getting a lot of rejection letters, you might also want to check what genre they're publishing.
Oh, definitely.
You might be doing the wrong one.
Yeah, I want to try a publishing company where it's just like, if it has a good plot, we'll take it.
Exactly.
Like, 'cause that was
Honestly,
so cool,
I want to. I think the only problem with that is the fact that you would be way overwhelmed by authors, and so I think you'd almost have to
True.
do a cutoff. I've been thinking about the same thing, because honestly, I would love to too.
That'd be awesome.
And just do a cutoff line, and instead make it so it's like the first 25 people to submit will take.
Yeah.
Just because you have to have a cutoff somewhere, otherwise you're gonna lose your mind. You're gonna be way too overwhelmed as a company.
Like, go ahead and submit.
So-
It might be a couple of years before we get to you, because I'm like, holy cow, but go ahead and submit.
Right, but exactly. But we're only taking the first 25 in the pile. So like, unless you really have no idea how to write, like only write rejection letters for those who are like writing like a 3-year-old in their 30. You're like,
It's like,
"And
stop,
then-
you're gonna need to submit like all of this?
all of this? Yeah, if those ones might get rejections, but everything else, I would say, give it a shot. Especially because there are so many people too who struggle with writing and reading English. I actually worked with a person who was willing, and I admire her because she is French is her first language,
Ah.
and she tried writing a book in English, and it was rough. Let me tell you. But it was rough because you could tell there were moments where she was just like she didn't know how to English. Understandably so.
Like, even in my first language, I don't know how to English.
I don't know how to English
Same
sometimes,
here.
and I am in English.
English
So
is
hence
like
why I was
the
like, "You are
weirdest
brave,
language.
girl. You go." Like, So it's not about being a bad writer also. Sometimes it's just harder because English is a hard language. Even if you are a native English speaker, English is a hard language.
Yeah. Pronouncing some of
So-
these words, like,
No, for
everyone
sure.
pronounces it different.
It's bonkers. It's insane. Heck,
And
I
then we
was-
have like American English versus like
Oh,
British
British English
Canadian English, Australian English.
Oh boy, that threw me off so bad because I was working with someone from Canada, so of course they were using British English, and at first I didn't know they were from Canada, so I was like, what the heck is up with these spellings? And then I googled it and I was like, British spelling for blank, British spelling for every word was British spelling was the excuse for why they were spelling it funny,
Yeah.
and so I was like, oh, they're just okay, fine, moving on.
Yeah, there's like a couple words that I just like I need spelled a certain way. So I
Yeah.
switched my like vocabulary to like British English.
Axe.
And then they'll have like cloud. Because like we spell with like a W-E-D, right?
Yes.
But no, it's like O-U-G-H-E.
Yes,
What the heck?
it's
Like,
so
ow?
bizarre. Yeah,
No,
it's
cloud.
it's like though, but with PL on it.
Yeah.
It's weird.
It's the weirdest thing. So I just have like my own kind of mishmash English.
Mishmash English.
Like
Yeah.
this is called Gwenese. It don't make
Gwenese.
sense most of the time, but here we are.
As long as you're consistent, I think that
Yeah.
is the biggest thing. Some editors might be like, dude, pick one. But that's because of the fact that certain editors, it bothers them. Other editors are like, as long as you're consistent, it doesn't matter. So it'll depend on the editor you end up with. Because personally, I'm all for consistency. As long as you're constantly spelling it the same way, I don't care. But if you're spelling it 5 different ways, I'm gonna say okay.
Okay, hold on.
Wait.
I spell Joe J-O-E, then I spell J-O-W.
You're like, wait.
J-O,
I have questions.
J-O-E,
Yeah, exactly. You have questions.
J-O-E, J-O-U-G-H.
But yeah, I will say some of the places you submit to might require you to stick to American, go American. But I
Axe needs an E,
Right?
right?
I'm gray.
No, okay, I actually spell gray with an E. No, that's, yeah, no,
I was gonna say gray with an E is the
Yeah,
British.
it's very- yeah, no,
I'm just like awkward moment of anyway, seriously though, I unfortunately you might run into some people who want to do the Americanized spelling for you. I will warn you of that, but I will say not everyone. So hopefully you'll get lucky and have someone who's not quite such a picky
what
person.
I'll do is just become like a China Aphrodite, start charm speaking them.
And just
Just like say,
do what I
"Actually,
say,
here's
please."
something. It's not a Jedi mind trick, and it's working. Therefore, you will listen to me because I'm the coolest person ever.
Oh man. But yeah. All right. So any other questions regarding writing or getting published?
No one's writing. Could you celebrate with me the first time I get rejected?
Absolutely, 100%, bro. It just made me laugh because I didn't see it. I didn't see you asking that question, but yeah, you took me by surprise.
Like, no, I like make him
Absolutely.
popcorn, watch a movie with him first time he gets
100%.
rejected.
Like, dude,
Same with
celebrate
Yeah.
those rejection letters because you still tried, and that's
Bringing
what's
up your
important.
friends even though I don't like them.
Make it a party, man.
My friends probably won't care. They'll just be like, yeah, you failed.
Yeah, you need new friends.
They'll just be there for the movie and the popcorn.
Yeah, so get new friends.
I mean, to be fair, yeah, you need some people who are going to
These my
support
friends.
No, they're my friends. You do not get to steal my friends. I'm sorry. I
you.
gave you the cousins.
I
They're
gave
my
you the
friends.
cousins. Okay.
Samantha.
All right. So,
My friends. Eat it.
all right. Any last questions before I turn the video off?
I think we're good.
Okay. Excellent. All right. Let's see if I can get this turned on.